So the 8th Democratic primary just finished wrapping up, and I gotta say, this was one that I didn't absolutely hate. In fact, I think this was one of the best debates for several reasons. I feel like the moderators were not all that bad. I feel like they were pretty fair in this debate. They didn't ask really pointed questions. Granted, a lot of the questions were framed from a right wing perspective, but that's probably going to be the case in most situations when it comes to the mainstream media. And I feel like Bernie just really won the debate. I feel like he was on fire. He was ready to challenge other candidates, whether it was Pete Buttigieg with his 40 billionaire donors, or if it was him on the defense when he needed to defend his record in terms of all of the amendments that he passed when he was in Congress. I could go on and on about some of the highlights of the debate, particularly with Bernie, but I think this question really stood out, and his answer really stood out here in terms of the Soleimani drone strike. I feel like in his answer, he pointed out a lot of things that are not really discussed in modern politics, and in terms of our relationships with other countries and the relationships that we foster with other brutal dictators and leaders that we have to talk to in order to have discourse in international politics. So let's play his response to the question here. It's only a brief snippet, but I think it really highlights just the level of thought that Bernie puts into his answers.
Senator Sanders, you have called this assassinating a government official. Yeah. You would not have ordered the strike.
Right. Look, here is the danger, David. There are very bad leaders all over the world. Kim Jong-un in North Korea is probably responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands of his people, threatening all of Asia with nuclear weapons. You got Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, who is a terrible murderer, who murdered Khashoggi in cold blood and dismembered his body. You have Putin in Russia, who has been involved in political assassinations of his enemies. You got Xi in China, who's put 1 million Muslims into concentration camps. You cannot go around saying, you're a bad guy, we're going to assassinate you. And then you're going to have, if that happens, you're opening the door to international anarchy. That every government in the world will then be subjected to attacks and assassination. What we have got to do, which Trump does not understand, is strengthen the State Department and our diplomatic capabilities, not just the military. What we have got to do is bring countries around the world together with our power and our wealth and say, you know what, let us sit down and work out our differences through debate and discussion at the UN, not through more and more war and the expenditures of trillions of dollars and the loss of God knows how many lives.
Senator Sanders, thank you. This does take me to Afghanistan and to America's longest war.
So I think that was a great response on Bernie's part, especially when he pointed out the relationships that we have with other adversaries. He mentioned Xi Jinping in China. He mentioned Putin of Russia. He mentioned Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And the fact that we have, and also, most importantly, Saudi Arabia, the relationship that we have with that country, who's considered an ally. A lot of what these leaders in these countries do are not good things. When you look at China, 1 million Uyghur Muslims are in concentration camps currently. We can't unilaterally drone top officials of other countries just because the opportunity is there. And that's not something that the Trump administration considered. Soleimani was a top general of Iran. That would be the equivalent of us doing it to any one of those countries that Bernie named in his response. And all of his response is not something that you will see on mainstream media. It's not something that you're going to see on CBS or MSNBC or Fox or any of that. So I think this was one of the most important answers of the night. I think whenever Bernie has a response to a question that has a particular level of nuance, he's really good at breaking down the levels of thought that are required to answer a question like this. So, a lot of times the moderators will ask a question that's specifically yes or no, and Bernie will give you an answer that is yes or no, and then he'll break it down. That's not something that you'll find with other candidates, especially Mayor Pete. When it comes to Mayor Pete, what you'll find with a lot of his responses is that he will not give a yes or no as an answer to the questions. He'll just pretty much repeat exactly what he just said. And if you look back at this debate, he did that a few times, where he will say something like, "as I said," and then just repeat the same exact answer. And I think being straightforward, being upfront with the American people is something that we appreciate in a candidate. And I would not be surprised if in a few weeks, or, well, I guess New Hampshire's coming up. I was going to say in a few weeks he'll get a bump in the polls, but maybe he'll get a bump in the polls. But specifically in New Hampshire, I think he'll do pretty well there come next Tuesday.